Hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today we're going to go over my February reading wrap-up. I read 17 books in February, and this was one of my best reading months in a long time in terms of quality, in my opinion. So we're going to go earliest to latest in terms of like which book I finished earliest in the month and which book I finished latest in the month. And there will be slight spoilers for every book I talk about today, but not too much. So the first book I finished in February was 12 Months by Jim Butcher. This is the latest edition of the Dresden Files. It came out in late-ish January. This was a very good book. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a bit slower than any of the other Dresden Files books, and it didn't really focus on a singular case like a lot of the other Dresden Files books do, like basically every other one in the series almost. But instead it was like a variety of different cases that Harry Dresden was trying to figure out at the same time, while also recovering from the devastation and after effects of Battleground. Now, Battleground, the previous book in the series, is a lot like Changes, in which a big event happens that changes the entirety of the Dresden Files world and characters. So there's a lot of after effects of that in this book. Unlike Ghost Story, which follows Changes, which I did not think was a very good book, 12 Months I quite enjoyed. I thought Jim finally mastered how to do that sort of style where you're following the fallout of things and it's a bit slower paced and a bit more character oriented. I thought he did a really great job with it here. I really enjoyed Lara's involvement in the story and how it shaped Harry and how it got him through his depression. And I loved how Harry realized you can't just beat depression. It's just not something that's going to be cured overnight, but it's sort of a long time heals all wounds type scenario. I also just really liked the cases that were going on in this, even though all of them were not solved. Some of them were left on a bit of a cliffhanger, I would say. But I really loved the way that he was working towards solving them all and how it connected to the overarching plot of the series. This book has one of my favorite scenes where Mab and the Mother Winter finally kind of go at it. I thought that scene ruled. And I just love the way it set up the series for the future. I'm really excited for the next book. And I think this book had a lot to do with it. Okay, and then after this book I read one of the Dresden Files short story collections, Side Jobs. You're supposed to read this earlier on in the series after Changes, but I never did. I read it after I was done with the series. I didn't like this short story collection. Now, it's not that I hated any of the stories in particular, or I really hated my time here, but none of the stories really caught my eye. They all kind of dragged for me. I gave this 2 stars. It's just okay. It does have some information in here that's worth reading about to figure out different characters and species that you're going to run into in the Dresden Files, like the Formore. I think their intentions are made known in this short story collection in a much better way than they are in the series. But overall, there's not a lot of super important information here, and the stories did drag a bit for me, especially the title story, which centers around Murphy. That's sort of the big overarching story of the whole collection, the Murphy short story. And I like Murphy as a character, but this story just did nothing for me, and I did not want to read a story from Murphy's point of view, really. So, yeah, this one just got 2 stars from me. It's okay. I didn't enjoy my time here, though. And then after that, we read How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps by Andrew Rowe. This is a lit RPG. It's my first ever lit RPG fantasy. Heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a big old school Nintendo fan. So I love The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. This book was right up my alley. I think it was a perfect introduction into lit RPG for me. And if you like old school Nintendo, I think it will be a perfect introduction into lit RPG for you. It's a great gateway lit RPG, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the book just a little bit. Like I said, it's heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The characters are obviously different because it's not The Legend of Zelda, so there are different characters, but they're all heavily inspired off of different Ocarina of Time or Legend of Zelda characters. And the story follows a pretty similar setup in terms of dungeons and levels they go to, but I will say the end is a bit rushed. So there's that. that would be my one small critique of it. I think the end of the story is a bit rushed. The first 50% is like, perfectly paced, and then like the last 50% feels a bit frantic and rushed. And because of that, I only gave it 3 stars, which is a good book for me. I loved it. I had a good time with it. It's a good book. I enjoyed it, but I can't say it was a great book because the end is a bit rushed. And then I read another Heather Fawcett middle grade fantasy, and that is Ember and the Ice Dragons. I think this is actually the first middle grade fantasy she had published. I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to look it up. But it's definitely one of the earlier ones. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It's a great book. I had a great time with it. It's about a shape-shifting dragon who turns into a girl because her father is this scientist who feels bad for the dragon and hides her as a girl because dragons are being hunted. And this story is really about the dangers of exotic hunting and how it's not a good thing. I thought the theming in this was spot on. The messaging was perfect, and it didn't overtake the story, and it didn't feel like it was preaching to you, but it really worked in the flow of the story. And in my opinion, Heather Fawcett nailed it. I thought the character work here was superb. This is really an atmospheric fantasy. It takes place in Antarctica, and I think that adds a lot to the fantasy of it all. The magic here is really, really good. It's a great book. If you like dragons, this is definitely one to check out as well, because there are a lot of dragons in it, and they're talking dragons, and they do fun stuff like riddles, and they're dangerous, and the action scenes are really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And then after that, we read the First Law trilogy, which I had a tremendous time with. I might make a whole video on that at a different time, but let's just briefly talk about each of the 3 books a little bit. The Blade itself, this book's weird because basically no plot progression happens until the end. And the characters you are introduced to are just not very good people. They're all super morally gray. I hear this compared to A Song of Ice and Fire a lot. I don't necessarily agree with that, because in Game of Thrones, the characters you're introduced to are all basically children, and they're all not morally gray. They're all protagonists that you can easily root for. Now, do they turn morally gray as the series goes on? Sort of, yes. And are there morally gray characters surrounding them that turn into point of view characters in later books? Also, yes. But in the beginning, those characters are easy to root for, hopeful children. They're not morally gray characters. The characters we were introduced to immediately in the Blade itself are already sort of despicable, morally gray characters. So it's harder to latch onto them right away, and there's not a lot of plot progression going on in this book. So I just had a real struggle in the beginning of this book. It wasn't hard to read, but I didn't know what I was reading or why I was reading it. And I didn't understand the lore of these characters very much. But by the end of the book, somehow Joe Ambercrombie makes you care about each and every single one of these despicable characters. It makes no sense. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how I was hoodwinked into it, but it all worked. It all comes together at the end. And the action at the end of the book, like the last 100 pages, the action is very, very much top-notch. It has a very good climax that leaves you wanting more. Like I said, there isn't much plot in this book. And I did not find myself liking the characters until probably 60-70% of the way through the book. But by the end, I liked it all. I give it 3 stars. It's good. I think the first 50 to 60% of this book is a little bit hard to get through. But do try to stick through it because it's worth it. And then we go to Before They Were Hanged, the second book in the trilogy, the First Law trilogy. And this one's a big step up for me because I'm already ingrained into these characters that I really like, and they throw some more new point of view characters at you, which are also just easy to latch onto. And there's a lot of plot in this book, a lot of plot progression, and a lot of world building. A lot of good world building involving the magic in this series. The magic in the series is very interesting. I didn't actually expect the series to have magic, because I read The Shattered Sea, which is Joe Abercrombie's young adult series, back in 2024. And there's magic in that series, but it's not real, it's fake. And I thought the same thing was going to happen in this series. That's not the case. The magic here is very real, although not a lot of people have it. But you learn about the magic here. You really figure out who the main antagonist of the series is in this book, and he is a despicable character, and not a lot of people are able to figure it out. I think you're really not supposed to figure it out till the 3rd book, but I caught on pretty early on in this book that this character was just not a good person. And there's just, like I said, I think the plot progression in this book is very good. I think the siege with Glotka is awesome. I love that siege. Very, very good siege. And the after effects of it work really well. I think going to the end of the world to find the seed with Baez and Pharaoh and Logan Ninefingers and Jazal, I thought all those characters got their time to shine in that whole quest. And I thought it really, really, really worked. And I didn't expect the end. The end kind of shocked me where the seed wasn't there. I thought that was pretty perfect way to do it. And then the battle in the north trying to rehabilitate West and some of the other characters that had like really like sour endings in the first book, I think also worked. So yeah, I thought all three plot progressions worked and somehow set up the last book at the same time while having their own individual arcs. And I was just really digging all the characters in this book. So this one got 4 stars for me. It's not a perfect book. It is a bit set-up-y, and I did think it was a little bit longer than it needed to be, but it's a great book. I had a great time with it. And that leads us to the third book in the trilogy, the final book in the trilogy, and my first 5-star book of the year, The Last Argument of Kings. This book rules. Such a fabulous end to the series, but allows the series to continue with other like books afterwards. After the trilogy, after the main trilogy, because there's still some loose ends that need to be tied up. There's still some characters that are just like in really terrible places. But the action in this book is top notch. The last like 250 pages of this book was just nonstop action, but with like great character work at the same time. And I love when action isn't just like pure just violence for no reason, but there's also character work intertwined in it. And I thought Joe Abercrombie did a fabulous job of that. This book really made me root for Giselle a lot, the king, who is just like thrown into this terrible spot, and he's used as a pawn the entirety of the book. Really, you find out he's been used as a pawn the entirety of the series. And this despicable character in book 1, by the end of book 3, is just this character that's very, very easy to root for. And this book had a lot of great surprises. And I really felt bad for Glotka too, but Glotka is also revealed to be sort of like a coward in this book. You knew that the entire series, but you thought he was going to step up at the end, and it just doesn't happen. It sort of subverts expectations. So that was done really well here. Pharaoh, of course, is just lovable, angry, vengeful character, and she's just really easy to root for, even though she's so despicable and a menace to society. I loved it. I loved this book so much. Perfect book, 5 stars. Definitely read this trilogy. I love how each book got better and better as it went along. Just perfection. Okay, then after that I read Best Served Cold, which is the first standalone in the First Law universe. It takes place after the original trilogy happens, and this is a story about vengeance, and our main character is on a vengeful path the entirety of the book. She wants to kill 7 different people who murdered her brother and tried to murder her, and you're with her the entirety of the quest. Of course, there are other point of view characters, but she is the main one, and I just love a good, revenge story, and this is up there with the best. It's up there with the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. It's up there with Mistborn and Final Empire. It's up there with the Bloodsworn trilogy with Orca. There's just so much great revenge going on in this book. Kept my eyes glued to the page. It was just impossible to put this book down. I flew through this book. I finished it in 2 days. This book's a chunky boy too, and I could not put it down. There's so much great action in this, but there's also so much great character work. And this book follows some of the more minor characters in the original First Law trilogy while introducing some totally new characters at the same time, including our main character, who is just like a totally new character in this book, but she has a bunch of people around her that are returning from the original trilogy. I thought it was a great way to do it, and it's a standalone, so you get a beginning, middle, and an end that wrap up the story. And yeah, is there going to be some after effects from this book? I'm almost positive there is. I haven't read any of the other books in the series yet, but yeah, this book ruled, and I gave it 4.5 stars. It's a near perfect book. It is a bit violent for me, I would say, but other than that, it really, really stuck the landing in everything it could have possibly done for me. Okay, and then I read the entirety of the Alcatraz vs. the Evil Librarian series by Brandon Sanderson. That's 6 middle grade novels. It's a full series, and I loved it. But let's talk about each book a little bit individually. The first book is Alcatraz vs. the Evil Librarians, which is the title of the series, but also the title of the first book. This book was very good. 3.5 stars for me. But I will say it is the weakest book in the series, in my opinion. It did struggle to find the balance between humor and serious moments a little bit more than the other books did. Obviously, each of these book in the series has a lot of humor in it, but this one really ramped up the humor to a level that I don't necessarily think it needed to be at. But other than that, this book series, it has everything you love about a Brandon Sanderson book, just in like a shorter amount of pages and words. It has its own magic system based on talents and lenses. It has lovable cast of protagonists that are easy to root for. It has some really fabulous world building, and it has some great action. So yeah, check it out for sure if you like middle grade fantasy. This book focuses really just on our world. They have to break into a library, of course, and there is some world building here involving the evil librarians and the kingdom that they're trying to hush. It's called the Hush Kingdom. They're keeping us from learning about the free kingdoms out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So there's some world building here, but it does take place in our real world. And then the second book in the series, The Srivener Bones, this one is actually my favorite book in the series. Almost the entirety of the book takes place in the Library of Alexandria, which, of course, was a real library, but is no longer a real library, and we don't even know what that real library looked like because it has been burned down. But because of that, Brandon Sanderson was able to world build and put a lot of like fantasy elements into that library, and I thought that was just really wonderful setting. And I loved the antagonists. They were like these ghostly librarians that wanted to take your soul in exchange for books. That really worked. This book had like Scooby-Doo style traps around the library, which I thought really worked. This book really focused a little bit more on Bastille, who is a side character in the first book. Obviously, she's not the point of view character in any of these books besides for the last one, but she took a bigger role in this. I do think she's the best character in the series. I think her and Grandpa Smedry are. And you get a lot of Bastille in this book, which I really liked. I thought the climax here was also one of the best in the series. So yeah, this is my second favorite book. This is my favorite book in the series, and I gave it 4 stars. I think it's a great time. And then the third book in the series, Knights of Crystallia. Now this book takes place in the Free Kingdoms, which are these islands out in the Pacific Ocean that the librarians have kept hidden from us regular humans, because those Free Kingdoms are not under librarian control, and there's a lot of stuff in those Free Kingdoms like dinosaurs and evil sharks and stuff like that. But yeah, Brandon Sanderson was able to just world build like crazy in this book. So I love that. That was awesome. Another great entry. This is my second favorite book in the series. I also gave it 4 stars. I do think this book has the best climax in the series. I do think this book is a little bit weird, though. Like I said, there's humor in these books are all dialed up to 11. There's a lot of humor in this one, too. It was straddling the line, just like the first one, between having a good balance. I think ultimately this one does have a good balance, but it definitely walks that line very delicately. Then we go on to The Shattered Lens, which is the 4th book in the series. This book is just an entire battle. The entirety of this book is one just giant battle in one of the Free Kingdoms between the librarians and the free people in the Free Kingdoms. And our main character, Alcatraz, who is named after a prison, obviously, is the king in this book, the king of this island. And he is trying to defend this island from the evil librarians. It has a lot of great action in this book. This is the most action-heavy of any of the 6 books in the series. So if you're really looking for some fun action, this book has it. It has a lot of good magic moments too, because this book involves like magic lenses and magic glasses, this book series, and there's a lot of cool magic lenses and glasses in this book. I will say this book doesn't have as many great character moments in my opinion, so for that reason I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it's a very good book. I do really, really enjoy my time in this book, but I do think it's a little bit of a step down from books 2 and 3. But not too much. Still definitely worth checking out. Especially if you love action. If you love a lot of action, this book has it in spades. Okay, then after that was The Dark Talent by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 5th book in the series, and kind of what was promised to be the end of the series by Alcatraz the entirety of the book. Because this series, Alcatraz is writing from the future, so he's writing his novels, and he's writing the story for us. So he's been promising all series that this book would be the last book in this series that would conclude his adventures, and that turns out to just not be the case. This book ends on a cliffhanger, and Alcatraz just says he doesn't feel like writing anymore. So I had a really good time with this book, But I did not love that aspect of it, that this book wasn't the last book in the series when it was sort of promised the entirety of the time that it was going to be the last book in the series. Now, it's not too surprising because Alcatraz is definitely like a very unreliable narrator, and that's proven itself time and time again in the series. But I didn't love it here. I didn't love the way this ended. I did not love the cliffhanger. I thought the cliffhanger was good, but I didn't love it, if that makes sense. This book does have set up like a really, really strong antagonist to conclude the series, and it does have some really shocking moments that I didn't expect to happen. This book is very good. I gave it 3.5 stars. This is another book that I really, really enjoyed a lot. But the end definitely left a sour note in my mouth when I thought the book was going to end in a more positive way, or at least wrap up the series, and it just doesn't. And we get the last book in the series, the book that wraps everything up, Bastille vs. the Evil Librarians, and this book is by Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson. Now, Janci Patterson actually wrote this book, not Brandon Sanderson, but she wrote it based on Brandon Sanderson's, notes and input and outline. So this is very much still Brandon Sanderson's intended story. He just didn't write it. And my understanding is he did this because he wanted to give Bastille a different voice so she didn't just sound like Alcatraz. So Janci wrote it, and it does sound very different, and it's a bit jarring to get used to. And I didn't love that. I feel like... I shouldn't say I didn't love that, because I actually think it did really, really work. Like, I love that Bastille did sound very differently, and I do think Janci is a fabulous writer. And I read a couple of her other books. We'll get to that when I do my March recap. But I didn't love that the last book in the Alcatraz series wasn't in Alcatraz's point of view, even though he is the main hero of the story, which this book goes on to tell you, or time and time again, Alcatraz is the hero. And by the end, you find out he really is the hero. But I just don't understand why it's not in his point of view. Like, it just felt really jarring and weird. And because of that, I gave it 3.5 stars. Like I said, it's a very good time. It has the right ending. The book ends exactly the right way. It is a bit quickly paced, too quickly paced in my opinion. I do wish the book just had a little bit more room to breathe. It is the shortest book in the series. It's almost novella length. But other than that, I don't really have any problems with the book. Like I said, the book ends in a really good way. It has some great action scenes. The antagonist is very, very strong. You get great character moments from all the main characters in this book. And I really appreciated that. And like I said, I thought it was like kind of weird that the book wasn't in Alcatraz's point of view, but ultimately I can't complain too much because I do think it has the right ending. Okay, next up is a new book that came out in the middle of February. It's Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter by Heather Fawcett. I gave this book 5 stars. It is Last Argument of Kings is my book of the month, but this would be my second favorite book of the month. In the month, I love this book. It's perfection. This was built to me as a cozy fantasy, and it is very cozy, especially the moments in the cat shop and all the different cats and all the different personalities they get. But it also has magic and a sort of magical, not war, but battle looming on the horizon, and a lot of great mysteries around the magicians and the tension between the cat owner and the magician, but also ultimately like a really wonderful romance too that really worked. And I just thought it had the right amount of humor and coziness, but also a climax that actually had like real stakes to it. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And I thought the setting, it was very atmospheric, and it hit all the wonderful sort of Heather Fawcett humor that she normally hits in all of her books. I love this book front to back. It's very quickly paced, but not too quick, and very colorful at the same time. Just everything about this book worked for me. Like, everything. All the characters hit. The main character, who is kind of Emily Wilde coded, but not as like grumpy and sort of strict as Emily. And our main male character is not really as charismatic as Wendell is, but he definitely has that same sort of like darkness hanging over him. But also you find out it's not really totally the case. I just love the storytelling, and I think Heather Fawcett is an amazing author, and pretty much everything she has written I have found at least to be great. But this book is also another 5-star from her, so I don't know what to say. Just a perfect book. Great cover too. This book has a really awesome cover. Okay, and then I read Dragons at Crumbling Castle by Terry Pratchett. This is a short story collection that was actually published after his passing. So this was published after Terry Pratchett died. And this is a collection of some of his earlier short stories that he published in newspapers before he had even started writing Discworld. Or at least publishing Discworld. I don't want to say writing it because I don't actually know if that's true or not. But before he's published Discworld. And you can tell that. Because you can tell this is very early Terry Pratchett because he's doing the same sort of satire and parody that he does in Discworld. But it's not as refined or as funny or humorous as it is in Discworld. It's a little bit rough around the edges. But some of the stories, you can find some like really good moments in there. Especially the title story, Dragons at Crumbling Castle, and the closing story, which is about Father Christmas the zookeeper. I don't remember the name of it, but it's about Santa Claus basically as a zookeeper trying to find a job, like a regular job. And I think both of those stories really work. They're both funny, both humorous, both have really great theming. But a lot of the other stories in this collection really dragged for me. I didn't find to be too humorous. Luckily, they were shorter, but still, it didn't totally work for me. Now, part of that problem could be because I listened to this on audiobook, and I don't think the narrator did a good job bringing some of those characters to life. But ultimately, I have to give this just 2.5 stars. It was okay. I didn't really enjoy it, though. Okay, and finally I read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is his young adult science fiction novel. But it does read a lot like a fantasy. There's magic. There's a school, a fighting school. So yeah, it reads a lot like a fantasy, but it's about this girl Spencer who wants to become a pilot because her dad was a pilot, but her dad was apparently a coward and betrayed the people of his planet. Of course, there's a lot more mystery going on around that, and the people in charge don't want Spencer to become a pilot because of the actions of her father. But there's also more going on around about that. A lot of mysteries. I love this book. Just front to back, loved it. It's one of my favorite Brandon Sanderson books I ever read. I gave it 5 stars. Just a perfect book. I don't know what else to say. It has everything I loved about it. It had a great school moments, a really easy to root for protagonist and cast of characters, a very good sort of Professor Umbridge style antagonist, some really, really wonderful action scenes that to me felt like a lot like the pilot fight scenes in the original Star Wars movie, now called A New Hope. Just think them flying around the Death Star, that sort of action. That's kind of what this felt like. Because there are a lot of action scenes where our main protagonist, who is in, pilot school to become a fighter, is in battles. And I think all of those scenes are tense, and there are consequences in each of those battles. This might be a young adult series, but trust me, there are a lot of consequences in this book, and there are some dark moments, but there was also some humorous moments. And the book is very tropey, but the tropes are worked in a very wonderful way. That even though if you see them coming, they just really stick the landing. I love this book. Such a great book. I was very surprised. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. So, yeah. Okay, and that is all 17 books I read this month. Like I said, there were, between The Last Arguments of Kings, Best Served Cold, Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter, and Skyward, there were just so many top-notch books I read this month. And you throw in a couple other series that I really loved, like Alcatraz vs. the Evil Librarians, and just finishing First Law and completing the Dresden Files. I just think this month was just a really, really strong reading month for me. So yeah, let me know down below if you read any of these books. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you read this month. And as always, thanks for watching.